Welcome to The Cauldron, a podcast hosted by Ed Bolden-Greer, the creator of Ravens Vail. In each episode, Ed will have free-flowing conversations about horror, life, culture, and personal growth. Expect to hear from storytellers, authors, horror experts, life gurus, thought leaders, and influencers. The Cauldron is a place where concoctions of a lot of ideas are brewed down to potions that are sometimes important and useful, sometimes eccentric and bizarre, but always just what you need. The Cauldron podcast may contain explicit language and thematic elements not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hey there, family. Welcome back to the Ravens Vail Cauldron Podcast, where the whispers of ancient wisdom mingle with the warmth of our close-knit community as we gather around the mystical flames. Here in this sanctuary of sorcery, we stoke the embers of curiosity and ignite the fires of imagination. I'm your host, Ed Bolden-Greer, and I'm joined by my partner in the paranormal, Jacob Garner, a.k.a. Frady Cat.
Hello, everyone.
Together, we'll brew up a concoction of topics that resonate with the soul and spark the imagination. So as the cauldron simmers, sit back, relax, and let the magic unfold.
In today's bewitching episode of the Ravens Vail Cauldron Podcast, we have a spellbinding treat just for you, as the veil between worlds begins to thin and the crisp autumn air whispers of enchantment. We can hardly contain our excitement for the spooky season ahead. Join us as we conjure up our plans for a Halloween season filled with mystery and magic. We'll also delve deep into the shadowy realms of the original masters of fright, the OGs of terror who have haunted our dreams and fueled our imaginations for centuries. Prepare to be enchanted and thrilled as we embark on this eerie journey together.
Hey, Jacob, how you doing, man?
I am doing wonderful. What about you?
You know, this week has been challenging so far.
How so?
I'm just excited about things that are happening this week, but at the same time, I have zero motivation. I don't know why.
I don't know. I'll tell you one thing I'm motivated for. It's football season coming up soon, baby.
Hell yeah.
Go Vols.
I'm also motivated that it's a little cooler outside right now.
Dude, it was nice.
Nice.
What did it say? When I got into my car, I think it said it was like 80.
I don't know.
And it wasn't that humid, so it felt like a true 80. You know?
Well, I like it when it's not so humid. It's 76 degrees in Knoxville, Tennessee right now. So beautiful.
It was good stuff. Man, so I've been reading a lot of news like I typically do. Did you see what's going on with Harley Davidson?
Fuck yeah. Stupid shit. They're struggling as a company anyway.
As is,
like
yeah.
They're in death throes, and they're going to pull this shit.
I know. For those who haven't read the headlines, essentially Harley Davidson, for the three people that wouldn't know what this is, they are a motorcycle company. I've also heard them called a T-shirt company that also sells motorcycles. But anyway, they're dropping their diversity initiatives after a group of, super cool right-wing anti-DEI campaign.
You mean Robbie Starbuck?
Yeah. He's your actual, typical conservative activist grifter who just stirred up a huge amount of controversy online, started pressuring the company, hey, get rid of this stuff. And guess what? Harley Davidson folded, and now they're dropping their participation in LGBTQ plus pride festivals.
Yep.
Which, super cool.
They're only going to sponsor sports stuff. I'm reading it right now.
Sports stuff?
Yeah.
Really?
It says we're only going to promote the sport of motorcycles.
Okay. Well, here's the thing about Harley Davidson. Because I've actually really considered getting a motorcycle off and on over the last couple of years as I barrel towards 30. Might as well get the midlife crisis out of the way early, right?
I thought you were doing that now.
So, fuck you. So, I started reading a lot of headlines about Harley Davidson. The main demographic of people who buy their products are aging out of the ability to ride their motorcycles. So, they're selling them at a massive massive amount. Every year, more and more gets sold, right? So Harley-Davidson was originally trying to figure out how they could capture my demographic specifically, which is, single males, millennials around the age where they now have a career and have a little bit of extra cash to throw around. Why not buy a motorcycle? And they were actually doing some really cool stuff. Like they were making fully electric bikes. There was one where they were kind of joking that there was an attachment on the handlebars to hold your lattes, stuff like that. And they were legitimately trying.
Harley Davidson, I can't even imagine. They put something into where you could hold your latte.
Well, see, like they typically build some of their models with cup holders anyways, but they were very hard leaning into the advertisement towards millennials and like, yeah, and you could even put your latte here or something. It was like back in 2021, if I remember correctly.
They've just always had that bad boy image. But, let me wear my leather jacket and have my latte.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't drink coffee. So.
But it was really lame because they found out that wasn't a winning formula. So what they're going to do instead is completely backtrack and decide that, hey, we're going to just really go hard in the paint, just supporting the already shrinking demographic that buys our products. So good luck, Harley-Davidson, whatever.
Well, I just looked this up while you were talking, and it appears that Harley-Davidson reported a 23% decline in first quarter profits.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're way in debt.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore they can't purchase the things they want to.
Well, and this goes back a little bit further than just people not buying their product. Remember a couple of years ago under the Trump administration, we started a trade war with China?
Yep.
So one thing that I thought was kind of funny and clever from China's government is that they were like, all right, cool, we're going to put a bunch of import tariffs on the most iconic American stuff we can think of. So they said Harley-Davidson, Jack Daniels, and Marlboro. Yeah.
Oh, little do they know. Okay, we got to get off this topic because I'd like to punch Harley-Davidson.
Yeah, I know, right?
But so I just want to give a shout out to Hillary Clinton. The DNC started last night.
Yeah, at the time you hear this recording, the first night of the DNC just took place.
Yeah. I was so impressed. It might have been the best speech that she has given in her career.
I think so, too. I think that it was definitely, in my opinion, it came across as her saying, I tried to warn you motherfuckers, don't fuck it up this time, please.
Yeah, well, and she's right.
She's right. I thought there was a couple of moments of the speech that I really, really enjoyed where she made a direct callback to she said, and I'm going to paraphrase real quick, quote, he's already attacking her in reference to Kamala. She made a direct callback and a reference to her previous campaign in 2016 where she said, quote, he's already making fun of her in reference to Kamala, making fun of her laugh and suggesting that she slept her way to the top. And then she said, heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a very hopeful speech. That's something that I'm really taking away from the DNC. The RNC was making it sound like they were Chicken Little, the sky's falling, trans kids are going to invade Israel. Just making it sound terrible and way over the top. The DNC is definitely pushing forward a message of hope and optimism that we so sorely fucking needed.
Absolutely. I had two great parts of that speech that I wanted to just shout out. And the first is a little petty, and then the second is a line from Hillary Clinton's speech. I took the time to look it up this morning.
Okay.
The petty part comes in when she was done with her speech, the entire audience, everybody in unison was chanting, lock him up. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
But the part of her speech that I liked the best was the ending, where she said, this is our time, America. This is when we stand up. This is when we break through.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And it brought cold chills. I've got cold chills right now.
It's incredible. I think that I can't wait to see who else is going to be speaking. So tomorrow, again, this is recorded on Tuesday, so really tonight, Obama is going to be speaking. Super excited for that.
I'm super excited for Michelle Obama speaking. I think she's on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who it is. I know that on Wednesday, Tim Walz is going to be speaking. Also, Nancy Pelosi is speaking, which I heard the funniest compliment for Nancy Pelosi the other day on a podcast. It was so funny, where they said, because she is one of the most brilliant Democratic, strategists. Was
What she did behind Trump.
Oh, yeah, with the limp-wristed clapping. She's like one of the most cunning Democratic strategists of our time, and somebody described her as a Prada bag with a gun inside of it.
Yep, I can see that.
Chuck Schumer is also going to be talking, Hakeem Jeffries. Also, President Carter's grandson, Jason Carter, is expected to speak on his behalf. Jesus, they've got
everybody.
Yeah, I don't even want to go through the whole list. Just look it up online. It's just nuts. But yeah, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Excellent. Well, hey there, family. The Ravens Vail Podcast Network is thrilled to announce our sponsorship of the Sleepy Hollow Ball, brought to you by Southeast Horror. Southeast Horror is hosting a Tim Burton-inspired Sleepy Hollow Ball for the first time in Knoxville. Join Jacob and I for an unforgettable night of spooky fun and eerie elegance.
Join us on Saturday, November the 2nd from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. at Jackson Terminal for a night of Victorian elegance and eerie excitement. Come dressed in your finest Victorian attire as we welcome the Horsemen back to Terrytown. Remember, the dress code is strictly Victorian. Stray away from it, and you might lose your head. The Ravens Vail crew will be dressed to the nines.
Immerse yourself in the chilling tale of the Hessian at the Horseman's Hollow Haunt, masterfully crafted by Screamville Haunted Attractions. Capture unforgettable moments with professional photography in front of their stunning Sleepy Hollow photo set.
Bring your shillings for the silent auction, which will showcase incredible Sleepy Hollow-themed treasures from Grim Wreath and Evil Seed Creations. Plus, unleash your creativity and show off your ghoulishly carved pumpkins in their pumpkin carving contest.
Get ready for a night brimming with dancing, murder, mystery, and more. Don't miss out on this hauntingly unforgettable event. Tickets are available on Eventbrite. Search for Sleepy Hollow Ball. So, Jacob, you've been a busy man lately.
Ooh, yeah.
Did you do your homework?
Dude, I most definitely did. I want to let the listeners know that typically I shoot for a certain number of pages of notes in my Word document. I doubled that. 'Cause we've had quite a few days to work on this one, so let's get it started.
Let's do. To get it all started, let's start with a little about the history of Halloween. From its ancient Celtic roots to its modern-day celebration, Halloween has evolved significantly over the centuries. It remains a night of mystery and magic where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, and the spirit of fun and fright reigns supreme. The origins of Halloween can be traced back over 2,000 years to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. This festival marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, a time often associated with death and the supernatural. The Celts, who lived in what is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1st. On October 31st, the night before the new year, they believed the boundaries between the world of the living and dead became blurred. During Samhain, it was thought that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth, causing trouble and damaging crops. Druids, which were Celtic priests, built huge sacred bonfires to commemorate the event, where people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes typically consisting of animal heads and skins and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the festivities ended, they relit their hearth fires, which had been extinguished earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the upcoming winter. By 43 AD, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of Celtic territory. Over the next 400 years, 2 Roman festivals were amalgamated into the traditional Celtic celebration of Samhain. The first was Ferilia, a day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. The second was a day to honor Pomona, a Roman goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, which might explain the tradition of bobbing for apples that is practiced today on Halloween. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread into Celtic lands. In 1000 AD, the church declared November 2nd All Souls' Day to honor the dead. It is widely believed that the church was attempting to replace the Celtic festival of the dead with a related but church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls' Day was celebrated similarly to Samhain, with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. The All Saints' Day celebration was also called All Hallows or All Hallowsmas. And the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic religion began to be called All Hallows' Eve, and eventually Halloween. The celebration of Halloween was notably restricted in colonial New England due to the stringent Protestant beliefs that dominated the region. In contrast, Halloween thrived in Maryland and the southern colonies. As the diverse custom and traditions of various European ethnic groups and Native Americans intertwined, a uniquely American version of Halloween began to take shape. The earlier festivities included communal events to mark the harvest season. Neighbors would gather to share eerie tales of the departed, predict each other's fortunes, dance under the moonlight, and sing haunted melodies. A blazing bonfire always stood at the heart of these gatherings, casting flickering shadows and adding to the mystical ambiance. Colonial Halloween festivals also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief-making of all kinds. By the middle of the 19th century, annual autumn festivities were common, but Halloween was not yet celebrated everywhere in the country. America was flooded with new immigrants in the second half of the 19th century. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing the Irish potato famine, helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. By the 20s and 30s, Halloween had transformed into a secular community center celebration featuring lively parades and townwide parties as the main attraction. Despite the best efforts of schools and communities, vandalism began to mar some of these festivities. However, in the 1950s, town leaders had successfully curbed these issues, and Halloween evolved into a holiday primarily focused on children. With the surge of young children during the baby boom, Halloween parties shifted from town civic centers to classrooms and homes where they could be more easily managed and enjoyed. Between the 1920s and the 1950s, the century-old tradition of trick-or-treating experienced a revival. This practice provided an affordable way for the entire community to partake in the Halloween festivities. By offering small treats to neighborhood children, families could theoretically ward off mischievous pranks. Thus, a new American tradition was born and has continued to flourish. Today, Americans spend an estimated of $6 billion annually on Halloween, making it the country's second largest commercial holiday after Christmas. Halloween has always cast a spell on our imaginations, concocting a rich blend of magic and fear. Let's journey into the origins of its most iconic spooks: witches, Frankenstein's monster, vampires, and werewolves. The timeless specters that make this holiday so deliciously eerie. Jacob, let's get started with witches.
Witches. Oh, yeah. I'm super stoked. For our listeners that are just joining us recently, I want to remind you that in our catalog, we actually did a 2-part episode on witches. We did one over the colonial witch hunt and then the European witch trials as well. So really, really deep information. But the main focus of the topics we're going to go over today are the iconic Halloween monsters and sort of their origins. When you think of your typical kids dressed up for Halloween, what do you picture? You picture somebody with green face paint and
the
bolts.
Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Pointy hats, broomsticks, stuff like that. So witches have been, I would say, in the Mount Rushmore that we've assembled today, they're probably the most iconic Halloween costume, wouldn't you say?
I would think so.
But it's also deeply rooted in rich historical, cultural, and folklore traditions. So, obviously, over the decades, witches have been immortalized in literature, movies, and television, solidifying their place in Halloween lore. From The Wicked Witch of the West and The Wizard of Oz, a classic, absolute classic, to contemporary portrayals in shows like American Horror Story, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural, all the good stuff. One thing that I think's really cool is that while I was doing my research for this, I wanted to figure out what the very first portrayal of a witch in film is. And here we go. This reminds me of the ghost ship story about the canoe. There's going to be some French pronunciation I'm going to try. Okay. So the first portrayal of a witch in film is widely recognized to be in a 1906 French silent film.
Wow, 1906.
1906. And it was in color, which is nuts, okay? The name of this film, here we go. La Fée Caraboussée ou les Poignards Fatales. Also, it's been translated as The Fairy Carabosse or The Fatal Dagger. It was recorded by a dude named George M., a pioneering...
Okay, so I tried to help Jacob pronounce this name. It has so many...
Just like accented
letters that I can't even figure it out. I'm pretty good at pronouncing names, but that one... We're just gonna use his initial M. Yeah. George M.
George M. was a pioneering filmmaker known for his innovative special effects and imaginative storytelling. It basically follows the main character of Carabosse, a malevolent fairy who shares many characteristics of the traditional witch figure. If any of you guys are curious, you can actually look it up on YouTube. Type in The Witch or the Carabosse Fairy 1906, and it will pull up a very short, it was long for the time, but short in today's standards, a 12-minute short film.
We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, and it's super, super cool. But when you look at the movie, you'll notice the very opening scenes, you have a haggard old woman with a big, crooked, large nose, the classic black pointy hat, and she casts spells in a cauldron. My favorite part of it is about 7 minutes in. She summons a giant frog to attack the main character or the hero, which is really funny. It looks kind of like, remember when like Monty Python would attempt to do like special effects? Mm-hmm. And it was very poorly done, but you could tell it was a little tongue-in-cheek. This was still groundbreaking for the time, but the frog monster attacking the male character, it's really, really cool, really funny. But it started with that film, and I think that became the sort of standard of how people wanted to portray witches. I think most of our listeners are really only going to be thinking of one witch when it comes to Halloween time, and that's going to be the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz. I think that's such a classic.
Or the Anderson sisters.
Yeah.
I think they're becoming super iconic.
Yeah. What's sad is that The Witch is considered a classic Halloween movie now. Oh, yeah, and I would be remiss to bring it up because somebody is going to probably write us in and be like, well, technically, do you know what the very first depiction of a witch in film was? George M. also directed a film literally 10 years earlier in 1896, which is just nuts. And it was called The House of the Devil, or Le Manoir des Diables. And it shows like an ethereal dark figure, not really like a witch portrayal that we would normally see. So I guess technically that was the first one, but when you think of your classic Halloween costume, it stems from the Fatal Dagger, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever dress up like a witch for Halloween?
I dress up like a witch every day.
That's fair. The next one,
since I was 17.
But yeah, for any of our listeners that want to get more of a deeper dive on witches in particular, I feel like our previous episodes really do a good job of covering that. So the next iconic movie monster is Frankenstein's monster.
Now I'm going to say this used to be my favorite.
Oh, yeah. And I actually, about a week and a half ago, I reread it. Mary Shelley, she wrote Frankenstein.
Can you believe that a woman in 1818, a woman wrote that book?
That is nuts.
Yeah.
And
I think it's amazing.
And it stands the test of time. I mean, I reread it the other day. Still a page turner, man. couple of really interesting facts about Mary Shelley that I don't think a lot of people would know, but I think it gives you more perspective of the message she was trying to portray in Frankenstein. Spoiler alert for people who have not read a 200-plus-year-old book, Frankenstein's monster details the story of a gentleman named Dr. Frankenstein who, tirelessly...
Dr. Victor Frankenstein.
Sorry, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who tirelessly tries to defy nature and the laws of God.
He wants to be God.
Exactly. He basically grave robs and assembles like $1 million man product, which he then...
The other side of that is that it was not uncommon for scientists to pay for bodies to be exhumed illegally to experiment on. One thing that I will note before you go on, her book had 2 titles.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, obviously, Frankenstein, but the second was The Modern Prometheus.
Yes.
It was the same book, released under 2 different titles.
The cool thing about the story of Prometheus, I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Prometheus was a titan, essentially, that gave the gift and knowledge of how to build fire to humanity. Yep. And it pissed off the gods so much that Prometheus, to this day, according to Greek mythology and Roman mythology, he apparently is chained to a rock where a large bird lands on him and eats his organs every day, and then they regenerate, and this is his punishment for the rest of his immortal lifespan. But anyway, yep, Frankenstein's monster, very classic. One thing that I think's going to draw some parallels between Frankenstein and Mary Shelley's life. So in the story of Frankenstein, Frankenstein is brought into the world against his will, doesn't know anything other than he's here now, right? And his own creator is disgusted by him, realizes what he's done, and then banishes him out of the castle. Frankenstein wanders around the countryside, eventually finds a blind farmer who takes him in. Obviously, the blind farmer can't see what Frankenstein's monster looks like and treats him with love and compassion. It's not until villagers with sight gaze upon Frankenstein and they're horrified. And even though Frankenstein hadn't done anything to draw their ire and hatred, they turn on him. They chase him. At one point, he rescues a young woman that was drowning in a river, and then the father shoots Frankenstein in the shoulder, thinking that the monster was doing it on purpose instead of actually saving his daughter. And one thing that I think is really interesting about Frankenstein's monster as I was reading it was instead of lashing out at the villagers, right, once he figures out that they all hate him, he immediately goes, I'm going to kill my dad. He's the one that brought me into this world. I'm going to fuck him up.
I didn't want to be here.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't choose to be here. Now, here's a really interesting backstory about Mary Shelley.
So what you're saying is that Frankenstein's monster was an emo kid.
Yes. Very classic, large boots, shabby clothing.
Well, since we're talking about what he looks like, he's most commonly popularized as having, the square head, the bolts in his neck, greenish skin.
Yeah, the skin is stretched horribly and macabrely over his, sinewy arteries and muscle tissue. It's barely holding on. I mean, he's got pearly white teeth, oddly enough, which I find funny in some of the depictions, but it forms more of a really dark contrast with how sunken in his eyes look.
Yeah. You were about to say something about Shelley.
Yeah, Mary Shelley. So now we know kind of the synopsis of Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's life was not too far off from Frankenstein. So when Mary Shelley was born, she was born to kind of a blue bloodish type of family. They weren't incredibly wealthy. Yeah, but they weren't poor either, especially for the
middle
time.
Class.
Yes. Interestingly enough, Mary Shelley's mom tragically died 11 days after childbirth to her. And this apparently made her father grow very distant. And he was basically hands-off, let the nannies and the servants take care of her. Also kind of interesting as well, Mary Shelley's father, which this was common at the time period and where they were at, but Mary Shelley's father was a dyed-in-the-wool hardcore anarchist. And in fact, paid for private tutoring for Mary Shelley to be kind of brought up into the anarchistic type of worldview and politic view, right? And I think that comes through in her book, where it just seems like chaos everywhere where Frankenstein's monster goes. It's like a reflection of humanity. Also, I think her experiencing sort of the disdain and sort of like the bitterness that her father showed her through no fault of her own, just being born, I think, in my opinion, that's a reflection of Frankenstein's idea.
I agree, but let's give some grace here. I mean, the man probably was grieving his wife as well.
1,000%. Oh, yeah.
Also of note, she was married to Percy Shelley.
Yes. I also found another really fun fact about Frankenstein. So you can look it up. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, I should say, was a vegetarian. When Frankenstein's monster talks to Dr. Victor Frankenstein, he tells him, quote, "My food is not that of man. I do not destroy the lamb and the kid to glut my appetite. Acorns and berries afford me sufficient nourishment. The picture I present to you is peaceful and human," end quote. So I think that's actually a kind of fun fact.
Yeah,
when you think about it.
I remember that from the book, but I won't say that I remembered that consciously.
Yeah.
So
if you're ever interested in looking at some of the iconic depictions of the Frankenstein's monster, look no further than the 1931 film adaptation of the book by James Whale. That was a lot easier to pronounce. Starring Boris Karloff. Now, the film introduced the image that we're all familiar with today. The monster with the square head, bolts in the neck, greenish skin, big lumbering, huge fridge of a human being talking really slow and really deep. And in this movie also, you see the classic double arms raised out in front of him, kind of like a mummy, and shuffling around with huge boots on.
Yeah. My favorite Frankenstein's monster of all times ever is Herman Munster.
Oh, yeah.
From the 1964 series. It went through 1966, and I saw it obviously in syndication. But the Frankenstein's monster that Herman Munster portrayed is how I envision the monster when I'm reading the book.
Yeah. I can totally see that. And there's every convention you and I have ever went to, there's always some sort of poster salesman or people selling prints, and it's always of that classic big head and really sunken in eyes. I really love that era of film because I truly believe that if it wasn't for the amazing makeup skills that they used on Frankenstein's monster in these films, I don't think it would have been as lasting as an iconic image, you know?
That's true.
Well, hey there, family. I'm Jared Bolden-Greer, the voice of Jude Grieger and Rock Corsell here at the Ravens Vail Podcast. At Ravens Vail, we love telling you our story. That's why I'm excited to tell you about the Appalachian Horror Fest 2024. Appalachian Horror Fest 2024 is an evening of music and storytelling themed around the macabre. The event will take place on Saturday, October 12th, 2024 at Central Cinema in Knoxville, Tennessee from 5:30 until 9:30 p.m. Our hauntingly talented musicians will serenade you with eerie tunes that echo throughout the misty Appalachian foothills. Gather round as our master storytellers weave their blood-curdling tales. Legends of restless spirits, vengeful ghosts, and ancient curses will dance in your imagination. Tickets are on sale now at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/tickets. Oh, storytellers. If your words can raise goosebumps and summon sleeping spirits, step into the spotlight. Submit your spine-chilling tale at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/storytellers. Appalachian Horror Festival, where nightmares come to life. We hope to see you there.
Well, what about vampires?
So vampires, amazingly, the depiction of vampires in film never occurred until about 2007 with Stephanie Meyer's Twilight series. No, I'm joking.
Well, those glittery, beautiful people were predated. So the vampires that are most iconic, what we would call the OG vampire, would be Dracula.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yep.
So I got my information.
Well, but there's a little history that we have to go on there too, that Vlad the Impaler,
Oh, yeah.
or also Vlad Dracula.
Mhm.
He was a 15th century ruler, and he had some really wild thoughts. And, he ruled by fear. And one of the things that he did, his punishment of choice, was to impale his enemies on wooden stakes and have them in front of his castle.
Mhm.
Now, Vlad the Impaler was born in 1431 in Transylvania, but he is the historical character that Bram Stoker based his character on.
Yeah, Vlad the Impaler was a bad dude.
He was bad.
Literally, he was a serial killer that would just so happen to be a ruler of this like fiefdom, right?
But even though all of that is true, nationally, he was viewed by a lot of people as a hero because of his resistance against the Ottomans.
Yes, and he used the execution method that he's now literally named after, the impaling. He was so good at it that he could impale people and still keep them alive for days. Like, he figured out a way to make sure it didn't puncture any vital organs. It's really, really dark.
Yeah.
Also, there were some accusations that he drank blood as well, which I thought was interesting.
Bathed in blood.
He was a lunatic.
He was a freak.
You can literally see where it didn't take too much of a stretch of the imagination to kind of swirl around the idea that he was a vampire and then start basing what we now imagine vampires to be.
Well, especially as those tales from that region started moving into like Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm. I think it's cool if you talk about vampires, even though Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula is who we all think of. I personally always think of old Nosferatu, a 1922 German expressionist film, which, kind of going back off of what I said, they had to use makeup really, really effectively because expressionist, as the name would imply, most of the narrative and what they're trying to get you to understand comes through the facial expressions and the body movements. Nosferatu had that classic ghoulish look. He had a large black robe with spindly little sharp fingernailed fingers, and he also had these weird dental implants. They gave him fangs and these pointed ears. I mean, he definitely looked like a little creature of the night. And it actually is kind of scary. I remember when I started looking at it when I was a little kid, even though I didn't think he was a vampire per se, I definitely thought, that's a creepy little fucking dude.
Creepy fucker.
A lot of what we see as vampires in Hollywood that then later transferred into the general culture of Halloween is my favorite, which is the slutty vampire, right? And it actually has its roots from the silent film era as well. There was a film literally just called The Vampire in 1913, which introduced the concept of the vamp, a classic femme fatale figure. But then rather than a supernatural creature that was all about, women that were just hot, that also drained your life force through sucking your blood, it was more of like they had psychological control. They used their evil, womanly powers as a vampire to control men and give them fame, fortune, and power and stuff like that.
And by the way, Nosferatu, the 2024 version, comes out Christmas this year.
Hey, we should go.
We should.
That'd be fun.
Yep.
I think when you imagine a vampire or a Dracula, it's kind of like a hokier one now. Most vampires in the modern sense are kind of like super hot dudes or chicks that just so happen to have fangs and they're super, super strong.
The not Bela Lugosi vampire.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. So that is the definitive, I would say, depiction of him. He had that Hungarian accent of "I want to suck your blood" type of thing, going.
Can you guess who my favorite vampire is?
Who?
I said guess.
Edward Cullen?
Guess again.
I'm not sure who.
The Count on Sesame Street.
Oh, shit, dude.
1, 2, 3.
One. I think I may have brought this up in another episode, but do you know why the Count in Sesame Street is obsessed with numbers? So in traditional Eastern European folklore, the idea is that if you were being chased by a vampire, you should keep coins or a pocket full of rice or grains. Because, I don't know why, in Eastern European folklore, vampires are obsessed with counting.
One, ah, ha, ha, ha.
Exactly. So they said that if you're being chased by a vampire, if you threw out a pocket full of grain, it would immediately stop chasing you to then count all of the grain so you can make your getaway.
Seems flimsy to me.
Isn't that funny, though? It's just like these supernatural creatures of the night stopped by something as simple as like if you threw an abacus at them, they'd be like, oh, crap.
I want to drink your blood. Oh, but I must count the rice first.
Yeah, exactly. I love, how did you pronounce his name again? Fucking Bela
Lugosi.
I think, yeah, there we go. My favorite.
Bela Lugosi.
My favorite depiction of Bela Lugosi's like Count Dracula. I know it's going to seem really stupid, but I love that that's when they introduced the big ass cape. I just want to, let's start a movement. We'll bring back capes. We should make our own like cauldron themed capes. That's what we should do.
They can be like fur lined.
Speaking of fur, perfect segue into our last iconic Halloween monster, which is the werewolf.
I love the werewolf.
The werewolf, to me, has a very cool backstory in terms of where it originates from. And we'll get into the film adaptations in just a second. But for those who don't know, a werewolf is a typical man, right, who gets bit by another mystical creature that also carries a disease known as lycanthropy. Lycanthropy manifests itself in a weird way where on the night of a full moon, the person who's been afflicted by this illness will start to grow grotesque amounts of muscle, sharp claw-like fingers.
Shedding their human flesh.
Yeah, barely keeping their tattered clothes over their frame as they grow a bunch of hair and mass. And then they go around usually eating like corpses out of graveyards, but also hunting any unsuspecting humans on the outskirts of a village.
Yeah. I found this very curious. There's more werewolf movies than any of the other OGs.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just give you titles for 25 of them.
Okay.
Wolven. The Werewolf of London. Wolf. That was a 1994 episode. Wolf Cop. Frankenstein meets Wolfman. The Curse of the Werewolf. Silver Bullet. Teen Wolf, Van Helsing, which you would think was a vampire movie, but also contained werewolves. The Twilight Saga, werewolves and vampires. The Wolf of Snow Hollow, Werewolves Within. Underworld.
I was going to say Underworld.
One,
was bomb
two.
As fuck. Yeah.
Ginger Snaps, The Howling, Dog Soldiers, The Company of Wolves, Ginger Snaps 2. The American Werewolf in London, The Wolfman. And that's just like the 25 most popular. There's like 100 and some.
I definitely would have thought the vampires would have been more popular. That's cool. As a guy who's named Jacob, I can say this much. When the Twilight Saga came out, I felt kind of cool for a little bit because people were walking around with shirts that said Team Jacob. I'm like, yeah, that's right. The original story of werewolves, I think, is kind of cool. Again, it stems from, Greek mythology. It follows the story of King Lycaon. According to the myth, Lycaon was the king of Arcadia, and he tried to serve human flesh to Zeus. Actually, it's not just human flesh. It was technically Zeus's son. He had this massive ornate dinner with a mystery meat stew that he then tried to feed to Zeus, and he succeeded. And when Zeus found out, he was pissed, to say the least. So, in his infinite rage, he punished the king and transformed him into a wolf. So the term lycanthropy actually refers to the ability to transform into a wolf. It's derived directly from this king's name, King Lycaon. And I will read a quick passage that's been translated that gives you the general understanding of the classic werewolf transformation. Quote, "He tried to speak, but his voice broke into an echoing howl. Oh! His ravening soul infected his jaws. His murderous longings were turned onto the cattle. He still was possessed by bloodlust. His garments were changed to a shaggy coat and his arms into legs. He now was transformed into a wolf."
Yeah, so he not only transformed Lycaon, He transformed Lycaon's son, too.
Yeah. Yeah, as like revenge.
Yeah.
But as you move into like the Middle Ages, witches were like the topic of the day, but werewolves were sprinkled in there in terms of things that you had to look out for if you were just some random medieval peasant walking around the country.
They were actually connected.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Witches were the master, and werewolves were often used to do their bidding.
Oof. One thing I thought was interesting about werewolves, I was actually listening to a podcast about serial killers and whatnot. The idea that there were so many found, convicted, and executed werewolves back in the day, like in the 1500s, the prevailing theory was that they were actually just really grotesque serial killers that usually cannibalized their victims. Human beings have been doing it way longer than Jeffrey Dahmer has been around. And apparently it was such, especially in those days, it was such an unbelievable crime against the social norms and humanity in general that the only way that the people in that area could rationalize it was saying,
make it supernatural.
Yeah, they can't be human. Whatever this person is, they're not really part of our group. So they started saying, yeah, he was a werewolf. And in fact, there was a dude named Peter Stube. He was known as the Werewolf of Bedburg. And he was a German man who was executed in 1589 after confessing, under torture, I might add, to being a werewolf and committing horrific crimes such as murder and corpse desecration. But when you think of the typical werewolf around Halloween, what do you picture, Ed?
The Wolfman.
Yep. Classic Wolfman. I think of like Teen Wolf. That was such an awesome movie when it came out.
Teen Wolf actually got its iconic look from the Wolfman, which came out in 1941. That whole shape and look.
One thing I think is really interesting, too, is that there's almost a little bit of like a crossover between European folklore and Native American folklore. Like our listeners who have been with us for a while, you'll remember we did a really cool episode about skinwalkers.
Yep.
There was the idea in some Native American cultures here in North America was that if you wore the pelt of a wolf, you could gain some of its abilities like speed and strength and dexterity. So I think it's kind of neat. I would love if I could have a fake battle simulator. I would love to have a classic European werewolf fight like a North American skinwalker. I think that would be super
That'd be
neat.
awesome. I will say that one of the things going back to witches in association with werewolves, sometimes witches were accused of turning into werewolves, shape-shifting into werewolves to be stronger, to be able to do more harm. But, I don't think any good witch would do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But if any of our listeners want to look back and actually watch a film where you can see the depiction of the werewolf that you see on a regular basis nowadays, you can refer back to the 1941 movie The Wolfman.
Yep.
It has all the classic hallmarks. Transforms under a full moon. Can only be killed by a silver bullet. Has a lot of fangs, lots of strength. I love the depictions of the Wolfman still walking bipedally on both legs, but being able to jump kind of like a Spring Hill Jack character as he runs around.
So, Jacob, this has gotten me really excited for Halloween.
Yeah, me
the
too.
Whole spooky season. What are you dressing up for this year?
Well, you guys already bought me a pretty cool costume.
Yeah. Is that what you're going to wear to the party?
To the party? No. I think what I want to do, I really want to do like a couple's costume. I've never been able to do thrupple's costume. I've never done like a joint costume. I did when I was a little kid. Me and my twin
You could do the
Zach.
Human Centipede.
Oh my god! Could you imagine us crawling in?
No, yeah, you wouldn't get through the door.
If we come, will you treat us as one guest or three?
Well, there's a problem with all that.
Yes.
First, if you come, you'll be there. Secondly, your guests, we love them, and they would probably get to walk through the door before you. So we would count you as three guests.
That's fair.
You don't have to share drinks amongst yourselves. But I'm really excited for all these things that we have planned.
Me too.
For Halloween. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm really wanting to get this question out.
Let's do it.
Are you ready for your would you rather question?
Of course. Let's do it.
Okay. So, Jacob.
Yes.
Would you rather
Mm-hmm.
have your deepest secrets known by one enemy or your most embarrassing moment broadcast to everyone but forgotten the next day?
Oh, I feel like this is a lot easier to answer than I would have originally thought. I think that if my enemy knew my most embarrassing moment, they could terrorize me with that for a long time. I'd rather just get it over with. I'll just shut myself in all day.
Aren't you glad I'm not your enemy?
Yeah, I know, right? Would you rather have Ed as your best friend or as your enemy?
Nobody wants me as an enemy.
I got a would you rather. You ready?
Yep.
Would you rather have every lie you tell manifest as a physical scar on your body, or every secret you keep manifest as a whispering voice that only you can hear?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, most of the time with these questions, I have an immediate answer. Like, I know the answer. I'm going to kind of wimp out on the last part of this. I don't think I would want to hear those voices all the time.
That'd drive me crazy.
Because, well, you know, my hobby, sleep,
Yeah.
I think it would interfere with that. And, you know, growing up in a small town community as a queer individual back in the day, I wasn't so out and proud.
Yeah.
And so the group that I was associated with then, we had to lie about everything.
I know.
It became the norm. Lying became the norm. We lied when we didn't have to cover up the lie that we told the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about when I was 23, I think, that I decided I didn't like that lifestyle.
No.
And that lying was no good. And that lying only caused me stress. And so since that time, I have tried to live my life in truth
Mm-hmm.
and living my truth. And one of the things that I will say is that sometimes we have to fib some.
Yeah.
Like when I told you you look good in your cutoff shorts and your Budweiser midriff.
You could call that a lie. You're just speaking truth to power.
No, you looked great. But so I think I'm going to choose the lie. Every lie would manifest into physical scars. I already have a lot of physical or psychological scars
Yeah.
from living that life. So I might as well have the physical scars to show for it too.
Just kind of balance it out.
Yep. I just, anybody out there who's going through that right now, it gets better.
Yeah.
It does. When you're out on your own, you get to make the choices. And so don't be afraid.
No.
Do what you got to do when you're not independent. But after you get independent, be yourself.
Exactly. Hey, Ed, you ready for a dad joke?
No.
Of course
Yeah,
you are.
I am.
Well, this dad joke comes from the queen of dad jokes, Starla.
Uh-huh.
So here you go. Just real quick, Ed, I just got to let you know, man.
Yep.
People who can't distinguish between entomology and etymology bug me in ways I can't put into words.
It took me a minute on that one. That's good.
Yeah, when I read it the first time, I had to like Google a couple things. I'm like, this feels like a good joke. I don't know why.
Shout out to Starla Blue. Thank you so much, Starla. Keep them coming.
That was a pretty good one. That was a good one. All right, family. Let's dip down deep into the cauldron and see what the brew has in store for us today. We have just one item in the brew, but Ed, it's a doozy.
Okay.
This one's entitled Broke and Confused from #Abigail420. It goes as follows. Ed and Jacob, I thought you guys might be able to shed some light on the situation and give me some advice on how to get through it. I've recently experienced a deeply painful betrayal. I am an open-minded 28-year-old white cisgendered female. My best friend for the past 15 years and my fiance, who I've been with for 8 years, have been seeing each other behind my back.
Okay, so that's two different people. Because when you originally read that, I read best friend and fiance.
Yeah, I read that
So
as the
it's
same person.
two different people. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I found out about their relationship about 4 weeks ago when I walked in on them in one of our guest rooms during a housewarming party we were having to celebrate buying our new house. My fiance was on his knees in a compromising position.
Oh, my.
Jesus. He didn't know the door lock was broken. I immediately confronted them, and he said he loved me, but wasn't in love with me. That's tough.
That's shitty.
My best friend didn't say much. He just cried and kept saying he was sorry. I will say I've always suspected that I think that's in reference to their fiance.
Yeah, I think so.
I've always suspected that he might be gay or bi, but he always denied it. This has left me feeling devastated, confused, and unsure on how to move forward. I want them both to be happy, but my trust has been destroyed. Yeah, you could say that again.
Yeah.
I would appreciate any advice you guys can give. And that's the end of the message.
Wow. So, hold on just a second. I want to, so it's a new house that they bought together.
Yeah.
Oh my. I guess you should check those broken locks. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be cheating.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Fix the cheating, then the locks. I just want to say too, Abigail, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
That's devastating.
This is shitty. You sound like a really cool person.
Yeah.
And I hate that this has happened to you, but you also sound like if they come to you and said, hey, I'm feeling like I might want to be with guys, you probably would have said, let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I'm going to look at this just like I would anybody. I'm going to take the gay and bi out for just a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it is never okay to cheat.
No.
If you have to cheat, you should
get a spine.
You should get a spine, and you should talk to the person you're in a relationship with. You should say, I love you, but, or whatever comes after that, because there's a million scenarios that could happen here. But cheating is never the right option.
Mm-mm.
We have a very close friend that is going through a divorce right now because of cheating. And it's caused anger inside of me at that person because there was no need for it.
No.
Like, it's senseless. Tell the person how you feel. If you don't want to be in the relationship, get out. Don't stay in a relationship for security.
Yeah. And it kind of sounds like maybe that was going on, Abigail. You guys had just bought a house together. And your fiance is going to keep this charade going. If nobody else has told you this, Abigail, I want you to know you can rack your brain all you want. You can replay the last 8 years with this fiance and think, oh, I should have done this or I should have asked that. Don't blame yourself. This was a choice.
This is not your fault.
No, it's not your fault. This was a choice that your fiance and who I hope is going to be your former best friend. This is a choice that they made, and it was a selfish choice. They weren't thinking of you and how this would affect you. And I do believe that your fiance probably does still care about you. The definition of love is pretty ethereal, I think, for everybody.
Yep.
It means something different. Not trying to draw too much of a comparison, but I do know, like, Freddie Mercury, right? Somebody that I really look up to. I've read so many biographies about him. You know, he was in the closet and really grappling with his sexuality, and he actually dated a woman for a very long time. And in fact, when he passed away, he gave a lot and a couple of estates to her in his will. He very clearly cared about that woman, but he couldn't love her physically.
He couldn't love her the way she wanted to be loved.
Yeah. And one thing, I think from what I can recall, it did culminate with him being caught. And then when he told his girlfriend, I'm gay, she went, I know, you know. What I will say is that I'm proud of you for trying to reach out, figure out how you can process it. The number one thing I can tell you to do, Abigail, go to therapy.
Yeah.
Go talk to somebody.
Therapy's always good. I do want to say this, regardless of how you handle this, just know that you are worthy of the love that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's easy to say calling your best friend ex-best friend, that's a struggle, especially for 15 years.
Yeah. Whatever you do not carry this hurt. And this is going to be a lot easier said than done, but do not carry this sort of hurt into your next relationship. It'll ruin it before it even really gets off the ground.
That's right. So I guess the 3 takeaways. 1, you deserve to be in a relationship where you can be nurtured and loved the way you want to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
2, none of this is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't dwell on that. Mm-hmm. And lastly, I think we haven't said it, but I think that in situations like this, we need to give grace.
Yeah.
It's a betrayal, and you may not be able to forgive them, but understand that they may just not have been able to tell you.
Yeah.
It's still a shitty thing to do, but I think give a little grace there, and I think that will help you more than it helps them.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, forgiveness is about you, not about them.
That's exactly right.
So thank you, Abigail, for sending this in. We hope our ramblings have made sense. We don't really get to see these until they're in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
So good luck.
Good luck.
Woo, that one was definitely deep.
Yeah.
We hope you've enjoyed this segment of The Brew. We want to hear from you, so we've made it easy for you to join in. Head over to ravensvail.com, click the social media tab on the menu bar, and select The Brew. There you can submit your questions, jokes, and spooky stories to be featured on the show. We would love to hear from you and incorporate your submissions into one of our upcoming episodes. Whether you have a burning question about life or the paranormal, a spooky story to share, or a clever dad joke to lighten the mood, this is your chance to add your special touch to the cauldron.
As we wrap up today's episode, we want to thank you for joining us as we gear up for the Halloween season, and it's just a few weeks away. With Halloween only 79 days out, we're thrilled to share some extraordinary events and episodes coming your way. First up, we teased you about our special After Dark episode in a previous show. Get ready for a live, unfiltered session where Ed and I will welcome a few guests to the G-Spot for some drinks and a lot of tomfoolery. Date and time still to be announced. On October the 5th, Ed and Jared will unveil their highly anticipated Halloween episode. Really excited for that. A top secret project that has been in the works all year. If it's creepier than Jared's infamous Christmas episode, I'm just warning you guys, brace yourselves. And mark your calendars for Saturday, October the 12th for Appalachian Horror Fest. Tickets are available at www.appalachianhorrorfest.com/ticket. And then finally, starting on October the 26th, Ed and I will treat you to a new episode each day for the 6 days leading up to Halloween. Trust us, you won't want to miss it.
Now, family, you adults have a few chores to do. Go on over to ravensvail.com and see about doing your chores on social media. Follow us on all the social media platforms that we've made available just for you folks. Like, listen, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't mind, please leave us a good rating and a kind comment. You can find the Ravens Vail Cauldron Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Just search for the Ravens Vail Cauldron Podcast and make sure you hit the follow button to stay up to date with our latest episodes.
And family, don't forget to tell your friends about us, won't you?
So until next time, family, see you soon.
The Ravens Vail Cauldron is a production of Small Raven Media. Today's episode was hosted by Ed Bolden-Greer with co-host Jacob A. Garner. Audio engineering and sound design by Nick Devan at Nicky D Sound. Copyrighted 2024, Small Raven Media. All rights reserved.